Welcome to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. Each week we talk about heart rate variability and how it can be used to improve your overall health and wellness. Please consider the information in this podcast for your informational use and not medical advice. Please see your medical provider to apply any of the strategies outlined in this episode. Heart Rate Variability Podcast is a production of Optimal LLC and Optimal HRV. Check us out at optimalhrv.com. Please enjoy the show. Welcome, friends, to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. I am back with a good friend of the show, good friend of mine, Dr. Scotty Butcher. Dr. Butcher, welcome back, my friend. How are you doing?
Thanks, Mr. Bennett. Matt, yes, thanks very much. I'm doing well. How about you?
Hey, can't complain. As we were talking about, we had spring hit us for a second here in Colorado, so just nice to take the sweatshirts, the coats. Almost thinking about getting the shorts out, but now it's cold and probably will snow this weekend. So that is Colorado
Yeah.
this time of year. So
Yeah,
uh,
we're on a bit of an upswing too right about now. We've got a bit of an early spring as well. We're above freezing, so that's pretty
hey,
unusual for the end of
hey,
February.
hey, you take what you can get. Take what you can get.
That's right, you sure do.
So before we dive in, I'm excited to spend this episode talking about how Scotty takes the research he does, the learning he's done, the expertise he has, and growing expertise around mental health, anxiety, physical health, and integrates it into his own routines, his own habits, his own approach to wellness. I know that there's a wealth of information there that I'm so excited to dig into. I did want to start out by letting our listeners know that Scotty and I will be doing a training on March 13th from 1 to 3 Eastern time here in the US. You can find more information of this at optimalhrv.com /training. And we're going to focus on HRV and physical performance. While Optimal HRV, a lot of these podcasts, we kind of go back and forth between the mental health side and the physical performance side. I think HRV has just really revolutionized in some ways how we look at training, how we can utilize HRV biofeedback into our thinking of our athletic performance as well as our mental health. So Scotty, I just love you get a second. One, I think you and I, 2 hours, CEUs are available. Why wouldn't you show up? But just some of the things that you're planning to cover in your section as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great introduction. Yeah, why wouldn't you come? I mean,
Yeah.
there's all the talk these days about the mind body connection and so many practices that are amazing practices, but maybe some misunderstood aspects of a lot of things. And the thing that I love about this work is that it takes the science of the mind body connection and makes it tangible. It's not some concept that's just out there. It's like it's data. It's looking at your own data and going, well, this is how I can tap into that bridge between the mind and the body and accessing it through the breath and through muscle contraction and all of the things that we do. And it's just to me it's just so fascinating. And then when you like you were saying, there's the physical and the mental and both sides of things. I mean, this is going to be on physical performance, but you can't take the mental out of it, right? You can't take
Absolutely.
the psychological out of the physiological. And I mean, that's why we do the work we do. So to me it's just super exciting. But what we're going to do is, I know, Matt, you're going to talk a bit about some of the technical practices and
Yeah.
around daily tracking and things along those lines, and some maybe how to do some of the basics there. We're both going to talk about biofeedback. I mean, that's one of the key things that brings us together and that aligns all of this. And I think in the physical performance realm, there's a few different aspects that we can talk about. One is general stress and mental wellness, which has, as we said, lots of relevance
Yeah.
to physical performance. But then we can get a little bit more specific and start talking about, well, how do we actually regulate performance when people are either over or under prepared or over or under aroused, over or under recovered, and how we can either titrate the nervous system up or down based on based on what we're doing and what
Mhm.
we need. And then specifically around biofeedback for recovery interventions. So, even between sets or between sessions or between events. And I've got a few examples that I want to bring forward as some of the things that I know we're going to talk about later in this session. Just some of my physical practices.
Mhm.
I'm going to be mentioning a lot around that. So it's going to be around what I do on a daily basis for myself and for the clients that I work with. And then at the very end, we're going to go into this really cool new area around detrended fluctuation analysis and for anaerobic thresholds.
And if
So
that
kind
doesn't
of,
give you goosebumps, I don't know what
I
will.
know it's going to be so cool, and I mean, you don't need to know all the ins and outs of the stats and that. You just need to know the number, and if you know what the number is, which you can get off a lot of the analysis software pretty easily, and the monitoring software pretty easy. You can do a non-invasive way of figuring out, well, what is your zone two,
Right.
and zone two is all the rage, but it's
Yeah.
based on you need to know your heart rate zone, but you got to do testing to do that. So this is a great way to kind of get around the technical aspects of testing. So I'm super excited to talk about all that stuff.
Awesome. Well, that's a perfect lead in to something we're trying out new. A few weeks ago, we released our first episode of this, kind of series that I hope maybe once a month or once every few weeks we do. And it's talking to the experts on how you've integrated this all into your own life, your own habits. And I really believe there's so much insight here because, a lot of times, especially on this podcast, I like to say we have 2 feet solidly in the peer reviewed journal world. And that is great. And that's where I want to stay. That's where I want to work. That's where I want optimal HRV to exist. And yet I really believe that talking to how you utilize this research and you bring it into your own practice, where we don't always have to have a meta study to say this works for me. I know both you and I will verify everything with heart rate variability and look at its impact. So I think this is just an exciting topic for me to explore, and I can't wait because I'm assuming that maybe a few things you do will get me thinking about it as well. So I don't know, as you mentioned, I know you work both on the mental health side of things and the physical health side of things. And I don't want to not necessarily separate those for you, but I wonder if you have a good starting place for us to explore what Scotty's days and weeks look like and how HRV and HRV biofeedback helps inform you living the healthiest life possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that. It's there's as much as we are based in the peer reviewed journals and the science, it's just like anything when you're thinking about what does this actually mean for someone today.
Mhm.
There's a lot of art that comes into that too, right? It's not it's we do base things on science, but you have to look at, well, what are some practices that people enjoy doing or that people are finding are successful for them, and maybe little tweaks here and there if they're not buying into one cue for breathing, then you have to kind of think of a different cue for breathing. And I think all of that experience that you have by actually doing this is what brings a lot of that out. So, um, I've had a bit of a journey and progression in terms of what I've done versus what I do now, and it started back. I got into this world from a mental health perspective, my own personal mental health perspective, before I was even trained in anything related to psychological health or mental health.
Yeah.
And I just found that the practices of mindfulness really, I know I've talked about this in the past, that mindfulness really led me down a pathway of trying to discover why it was so effective for me, other than, oh, it's just, thinking differently or
Yeah.
whatever. I knew there were changes in my body and I wanted to understand that. So I started looking into that. I started measuring heart rate variability, and I started, I bought an Aura ring. As that was one of the very first things that I did, other than getting a tracker. Before I met you guys, I didn't have the optimal at that time, but I had a Polar, and I would use that, and I had like I said, an Aura ring, and I got very interested in my sleep patterns. And
Hmm.
so looking at my overnight heart rate variability was very, very eye-opening for me to examine what the impact of different practices that I had each day would have, as well as, if I was more stressed or if I was going to be sick. I found it very predictive of those things when you see a drop, more than just, beyond the baseline random error that we get with these measurements, and something that's more consistent. It sort of predicts a bit more of that there's challenges coming up, right? And so I can dictate my days, but I really enjoyed using it as a method of really kind of doing my daily tracking, and that's where I really started with this. Well, once I got into the biofeedback piece, and started looking into biofeedback, that was a complete game changer for me. So I actually don't wear my Aura ring anymore because I got a bit transfixed on the numbers, which I find some people can do
Yeah.
sometimes, is being like, oh, damn it, my RMSSD went down by 2.
And now I'm going to be terrible in everything I do today.
That's right. And I think to some extent that's natural when you're looking at numbers. That's the beauty of data,
Yeah.
is that you can look at things that are concrete, but you have to be a bit careful. And this is something I tell my clients too, that if you start finding that you're worried about these little changes,
Hmm.
then you're actually doing more harm psychologically and eventually physiologically to yourself by stressing over it. It's like stressing over when we're looking at the dot going up and down, the little
Yeah.
ball going up and down, and am I transitioning my inspiration to my expiration right at the right moment? If you're stressing about stuff like that, you're missing out on the point. And that was a lot of the learning that would go on. And so I don't wear an Aura ring anymore because I do my daily HRV work anyway. So so I've transitioned from that, and now what I do is I do biofeedback on a daily basis. Now I'll qualify that and say it's actually not always biofeedback. Sometimes it's just the paced breathing, and
Hmm.
and there's really not a lot of difference, other than when you do biofeedback, you have the data in front of you, and you're actually watching, or you're getting some sort of tactile or whatever feedback on what's happening, and you're seeing your HRV go up or down and things like that, which is absolutely fantastic. But what I've found is the the learning that has come from that, and the growth that has come from that, in terms of my ability to tap into my parasympathetic nervous system and my vagus nerve. It is a learning curve. And so I used biofeedback daily with the actual tracking early on
Yeah.
in my practices. And I found that massively eye-opening. I found it massively helpful. And what was really helpful was learning how to feel those things by seeing the data. But
Hmm.
then the real power of all of this work is by using the data to determine what's happening and know specifically what's going on for you, but then to take the data away
I love
and to
that.
go, well, I can use that to learn what I really truly feel inside. That interoception that I know we've talked about a lot, and a lot of your guests have talked about. That's such an important aspect of learning what it means to just have your stress dial up a little bit or down a little bit, or to recognize how you're reacting to something or another thing, or how well you're recovering from a bout of exercise, when we talk the physical performance side of things.
Yeah.
And so what I do on a weekly basis, let's say, is I have 2 or 3 true biofeedback sessions where it's just more of a check for me, because I know what I'm supposed to be feeling now. and I've used the data to confirm that time and time and time again, that I know interoceptively that my practice is effective when I take the feedback away and I just do some paced breathing. And often it's not even with a pacer, because you develop that
Yeah.
skill and that experience to just know you can drop into that pace at any time without any app, without any device. But you need those initially. You need the app,
Yeah.
you need the device, you need that data to learn what's the right way for you. Right from the resonance frequency assessments and making sure that you're at the right level, but also then monitoring to make sure that the cues that you're thinking of, and the focus that you have, and the mindful piece of it just all fit together, so the data is looking the way that you want it to during biofeedback, and then it's take it away and use it throughout your daily life. So that's what I do more than anything now. I still, like I said, I still use 2 or 3 times a week. I'll use the app and actually do an actual practice with the monitor, just as a confirmation. But I enjoy doing that too.
Yeah.
But other times I'll do meditations formally, and I'll drop into the pace breathing while I'm meditating without even a pacer. But then out in life,
Yeah.
noticing that you're stressed, or again you're under recovering, or you're really breathing heavy because of XYZ. It doesn't matter whether it was an exercise stress, or an anxiety stress, or anything like that. You can learn what that feels like, and then to bring it back into a place where you can be more calm, so that in a presentation like our training that we're going to do, where I
Yeah.
used to get all anxious about that kind of thing, I know that I'm going, oh, I recognize what that is. That's just me being excited, which is cool.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I've learned to taper that down a little bit and bring in some ventral vagal, along with the sympathetic, which, if you're thinking polyvagal. So anyway, that's sort of what I do on a daily basis. When it comes to HRV specifically, I mean, exercise, you can't get rid of exercise. Exercise is such an important part of what we do and what we should be doing. And you showed me your biceps the other day, that you've actually gotten into a bit of strength training, and I really value strength training. So I'm going to have a bit of a strength training slant when we do the training as
That's
well.
awesome.
So I use this practice when I'm training. And I don't know if do you want me to talk about that?
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd
Okay.
love to learn. I'd
So
love to learn those secrets.
Yeah. So I do strength training, as I mentioned, and I have competed. I haven't competed for a few years now, but I have competed in powerlifting. And one of the things that I noticed early on in my powerlifting career was that, when you go into heavier sets with lower reps, and you're starting to push towards a one rep maximum, or one of your max lifts, that recovery is longer. Even between sessions, but also between sets. And it just makes sense that you have to ramp up your sympathetic nervous system. You have to get yourself in an engaged state to be able to lift
Yeah.
heavy. But you don't want to take that so fully out of control that you can't then come back and actually have recovery. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see on, let's say, competition day, for example, with powerlifters, is that they're just ramped up the whole day,
Yeah.
right? You can't be ramped up in sympathetic for 8 hours a day and expect to perform very well
Exactly.
by the end of that, or
Right.
even recover, right?
Yeah.
Powerlifters are notorious for going all out for a competition, and then having weeks and weeks and weeks to recover. And yeah, I mean, that's partly the nature of the sport, for sure, but I think it's also partly because they're not focusing on recovery as much as they are on the lifts. And
Yeah.
so what I'll do, and what I recommend people in this world do, is get yourself revved up for your lift, whatever your lift is, whatever set is. Get yourself revved up, and there's lots of different ways, through your breath or through your mindset or whatever. There's lots of ways to do that. Even the smelling salts and that. I've tried those a few times, just not my thing. But anyway, get yourself revved up. But between sets, or between events, or between lifts, I think it's really important to learn how to come back down, and to
Hmm.
learn how to get into a recovery state, so that when you're ready to go again, boom, you can get
Yeah,
up and ready to go. And you're not staying at that constant high sympathetic, that constant high arousal. What you can do is you can come back down and actually get yourself into a recovery state, a repair state to a certain extent between events or between your sets or
I love
between
that.
whatever you're
Yeah.
doing. And so what that means is within the course for me, I try within the course of, depending on how heavy I've gone, 20 to 30 seconds, maybe longer if it's closer to a one rep max, maybe up to a minute, where I'll just sort of regulate at the breathing pace that feels comfortable. I'll just try and lower my tidal volume down on my depth a little bit, down just to try and bring ventilation down a little bit. But then after that point in time, I'll see if I can get down almost into resonance frequency and drop down into that. And I find it's just such a beautiful recovery method when you allow yourself to kind of naturally come down, but even force yourself into something a little bit lower to just be, feeling really good and recovered, not only from a mindset perspective, but even an oxygen recovery
Yeah.
perspective, and getting enough oxygen back into the muscles by not overventilating between sets. And I think that's a missing part that a lot of people don't think about. So yeah, so then that's what I do during exercise. I don't do a lot of aerobic exercise other than my daily walks. I haven't used a lot of that, and I certainly wouldn't recommend doing resonance frequency during aerobic exercise. But thinking about some of the principles are pretty important so that you're not overventilating as well.
I would love to
Very good.
ask, I have 1,000 questions, but I also know we got the training coming up. So I'll leave a little bit unsaid there, but I would love just as somebody who's in the powerlifting world, because I'm trying to rack my brain having listened to tons of podcasts and, powerlifting is, I don't really remember ever hearing a power lifter talk about heart rate variability. And I wonder, is there any integration there? Is what you're talking about, would that just blow the mind of the typical, power lifter, or is this science of recovery integrated, has it made any kind of headway into that world?
Short answer is no. I mean, I think powerlift. Well, it's just like anybody at a level of sport that they're doing something that they enjoy, but they want to take seriously.
Yeah,
The performance is very very important, and everybody has their own sort of style and way of saying how they're going to rev up for a lift or prepare and what they can do. I think at a basic level, most of them would understand that they've got to rev for the
yeah,
lift. And but I think it's that recovery piece that isn't as well thought out and isn't as common. And I think part of it is that going back to what we said near the beginning, that we're really focused on the peer-reviewed research. There really isn't a lot in the peer-reviewed research to suggest that this method is over and above better than other methods for
yeah,
competition. I haven't seen anything related to tying powerlifting and HRV or
right.
breathing during a event, let's say. There's some stuff on training, but not powerlifting specifically. It's strength training in individuals. So I think that again, it's a very underthought of way of looking at things, but something that can be really, really beneficial. And this is my own anecdotal data. I always find that my sessions are more effective, my recovery is more effective, and I have done mock meets, not an actual meet using this, but I've done mock meets where just going through the motions of pretending the
Yeah.
lifts and that, and used it in that, and it's been really effective. Oh, and one of my clients has tried this as well, and also found it very effective to be able to learn even the idea that you can't stay revved the whole time. I think
Right.
intuitively we know that, but to
Yeah.
actually again have the science and the data to say, okay, well let's actually come down before we go back up again is something that is fairly new.
I love that. Well, I will spare our audience creating a business plan around integrating this into that world. But it's fascinating because I think in other worlds, like, is there a professional hockey player or basketball player, golfer who isn't tracking HRV in some ways, whether that's just an Apple Watch or whether that's a more in-depth exploration. So it's interesting that it hasn't quite maybe hit that arena, quite as much. So I did want to pick up on something you threw out there as well, because here you got two guys on this podcast, both that don't do any aerobic, real strategic activities. And for me, I know that that's partly research based, partly because, sometimes running a half marathon hurts. But I'm curious, have you always sort of been a zone two person? Has that been an evolution? Because you and I share that, my physical activity during the day is walking, and I've got a treadmill right here by my desk. So sometimes I'm walking, during meetings and other things or working on projects. I'm grateful to live in a beautiful area. So I'm all about the zone two, and I'd love to hear. Did that just evolve into that? But kind of your progression into that sort of zone two as your go-to for movement as well.
Yeah, it's definitely coming from the evidence and in my past life of when I was a physical therapist and an academic teaching exercise physiology and prescription, that was an evolution of mine. I mean, when I was younger, I always loved strength training, but I always knew that I had to go for my runs,
Yeah.
and I played rugby as when I was younger, and so you can't play rugby without learning how to run and sprint
Right,
and
exactly.
and things like that. So I mean that's relevant. But what it evolved into is sort of thinking of a sport versus a health model. And in sport, I mean, you have to be specific to the sport. So I mean, if you're going to try and excel at 10K running or 5K
Yeah.
running or marathon running, you better not be just talking about zone two, right? Like
Yeah.
like there's a lot of zone two, zone three work that happens, this
Right.
lower, kind of around anaerobic threshold. There's a lot of stuff that happens there, but certainly that's not all of the training. So even the research in that area though suggests that if you're just staying right around that zone two, zone three, maybe into like the top of three, that's not quite as effective. It's called the threshold model. It's not quite as effective as doing what they call a polarized model, which is a lot, like 80% of your intensity in zones one and two, and then you have like 20 to 15 to 20% at super high intensity and maybe a little bit at threshold, and that can be more effective. And there's some models of that in the health world as well, in the chronic disease management world, where again that was part of what I did in my past life that really informed my thinking now. And so based on what we know out there, you need your minimum amount of physical activity at moderate intensity, right? 150 minutes a week, according to most organizations, say that that's what you want. Now, how you do that can be comprised of and really anything, right? So, if you're thinking of that sort of polarized model and the model of health, well, we know that physical activity, if you're going to go for volume, should be at a fairly low intensity, and that's where the zone work or the zone two work kind of concept comes in. Is doing a lot of that down there, and that's where the kind of the walking can come in. And some people that are in better shape than I, it might be a slow jog, right? Or it might be what some people call rucking, which is putting on a weighted
Yeah.
vest and doing that. Like that's all, depending on your individual fitness levels, and that, would all keep you at a heart rate that would be well below your anaerobic threshold that you could sustain for a long period of time. But what's missing from that is that 20-ish percent of higher intensity work. Now, a lot of people will accomplish this doing like HIIT exercise, high intensity
Mhm.
intervals, or sprinting exercise. That can be hugely beneficial for guys like me who I don't really care if I sprint again. I mean, great if I can still do it, but it's not part of my main goals. I want to be able to get off the toilet in 30
Yeah.
years
Yep.
without needing assistance. I'm going to be squatting, right? And I'm going to be doing my resistance exercise and keep myself cardiovascular healthy with the lower intensity. So it's evidence based, but it has been a bit of a transition from me being more of a that aerobic based athletic type into something that's more of yeah, I'm just trying to survive life.
Yeah, exactly. I just think it's fascinating what the science has helped us evolve into. And again, you make a great point that obviously if you're going to be a runner or your sport like me playing basketball, kind of like rugby, you better be running because it is part of the sport. And yet when we think about wellness, I think so many people think I've got to go run a 10K or a half marathon to be healthy. And there's some evidence out there that running that sort of level of distance for a lot of folks is actually not healthy. You may get more fit along the way if you're not doing anything to gain that level. But this whole sweet spot of brisk walking, which I most people can do, or a brisk activity, if walking is something you can't do, just that sort of level of activity is for many of us ideal unless we have those greater athletic sort of goals or participation out there, which I think is really just an interesting evolution of where we've come on this whole journey we're in to try to live healthy lives.
Yeah, that's a great point too. And you look at the aerobic boom of the 70s and the 80s
Yeah,
from the Cooper Institute and all of that. I mean, that's where all that research came. I put out a video, man. Must have been about 10 years ago now. It was on sort of the optimal prescription for health, and it's well, what if Kenneth Cooper, the originator of the Cooper Institute, he was a runner, right?
yeah,
And so he focused his research on running, and he
yeah,
focused his research on aerobic activity. I asked the question in this video. I'll try and dig it up and link it in for the viewers because I think I still have it. What if he was a weightlifter?
yeah,
What if
exactly.
Kenneth Cooper was a weightlifter? Would our entire world be completely different
Yeah,
now? Just because what we know is that the benefits of resistance training are equal
yeah,
to that of aerobic training.
yeah,
And in some cases, greater depending on what you're looking at in terms of benefits. But you look at cardiovascular health, you look at muscular health, you look at bone health, you look at mental health. I mean, they stack up side by side.
yeah,
When you start looking at things like physical functioning,
yeah,
resistance training has a bit of a win there.
yeah,
Even on cognitive functioning and metabolic disease like diabetes, those sort of
yeah,
things. Resistance training has a bit of an edge on those ones. Getting off the toilet, I
yeah.
don't care if you walk every day, but if you don't practice a squatting motion and stay strong there, when you're 80, you're not going to be getting off the toilet quite as easy, right? So these are things that are important. And we joke about getting off the toilet, but that is the biggest
Yeah.
predictor of whether someone needs long-term care.
Oh,
Is
absolutely.
can they independently use the washroom without the chance of injury or hurting themselves or falling or whatever?
Yeah,
It's a
such a
massively important
functional
aspect.
aspect to this as well. So I would love to hear kind of your day. So how do you fit in? I'd love to hear also you've talked about movement, you talked about sleep, maybe throwing in a little nutrition, how you approach that. But walk me through how you've integrated this to. I'm sure you built habits over time that you may not even think about much anymore. But I'd love to kind of hear how you integrate this in your typical day, or what different days of the weeks look like for you.
Yeah, awesome. Let's just say at the top end, it's all about moderation. I'm not. I used to be very focused on certain things and used to really get into if I'm only going to work on this, I'm only going to work on this,
Yeah.
right? And really, I think I've sort of taken the edge off of that with a little bit of I always say the gray matter from my brain has drifted outwards to my hair and my beard, so I've lost a bit of it there, gained it in the hair, but
Yeah.
that's fine. As I've aged, maybe there's a bit of wisdom, or maybe it's
Mhm.
stupidity, or maybe it's not
We're
caring
not
as
playing
much. I don't.
rugby, which seems like
I'm
it.
not playing. Yeah,
I know
exactly.
some
Not playing
rugby
rugby
players
right now.
over the years. Moderation would not be the word I used to describe any of them. So, yeah,
Well, you look at yeah, in the 20s, go hard in training, go hard in practice, go hard in the games, go hard in the bar afterwards.
yes,
And all of those things are things that, aren't the lifestyle that's going to sustain me. So,
yeah,
you know, I'm not. I go with the flow a lot of the time. I'm not one to say I have to do something in a certain way.
yeah,
I allow myself some flexibility, and I think that's really important as we're having this type of a discussion. That it's the same thing as you look at when you're looking at the data, right? It's that mindset of if you see that little drop, are you going to freak out?
yeah.
Well, no, because I mean some people would, and I used to. So you look at that and you go, yeah, that's probably within my normal range. And even if
Mhm.
it does drop, it's still not going to be a freak out. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. I wonder why that is. And you think about that, and then you
Yeah.
go, maybe that was because I don't know, I had a really, fat laden dinner last night, and
Mhm.
with lots of grease or something like
Yeah.
that, bad fats. Or it might be bad sleep, or it might be alcohol, or it might be maybe I am getting sick, or maybe I'm
Yeah.
just coming off of something, or whatever, and so using it as a teaching tool rather than a freak out kind of thing. And in terms of answering your question, I typically get up 5 a.m. to 6 a.m., somewhere in that range. I strive for 5, and some days it works, and some days I don't. Again, I give myself the grace that it's okay if I need to sleep in a little. That that it's probably my body telling me that that's what's needed, so that's okay.
And
I
just like
will.
two old dudes with sleeping in means six. I,
That's true. That's true. I'm trying to
I
remember the
think you
last
should
time I
give
slept
yourself a
longer than
little
that.
grace there, my friend. If a sleep in is usually 6 a.m. So, yeah.
Well, weekends can be a 9 or a 10 for sure.
Okay,
Sometimes.
that's I'm just
Yeah,
impressed by
yeah,
that because I
yeah,
I haven't been able to accomplish that in years. So
yeah. I love the 5 a.m.s. 5 a.m. is such a beautiful time when I've gotten enough sleep. It's
yeah.
such a great time. Nobody else is awake. It's a time for contemplation. It's a time for reflection. It's a time for awakening. It's a time for doing things that soothe me and that
Love
soothe
that.
my spirit. Others may say soothe my soul, that kind of thing. I use that sort of the 5 to 6, or if I get up at 6, it might be 6 to 6:30 or so. I use that time to either read or journal or meditate. Usually there's some combination of a meditative style of practice. And the breathing practices that happen in the morning. Again, I don't schedule it out so much that I have to stick to it, but it's the habit that I've developed is just simply getting up and just, really setting the intention for the day based on what I'm doing physiologically. And this is, what I used to hear people talk about set your intention for the day, and it's all mental. It's all psychological. I mean, that can be good. And I know a lot of people like that sort of thing, but I really love the physiological piece of it
Mm,
because then it drives what your mental state is. So it's using the body, which is really what biofeedback is all about. It's using the body and the body's feelings, the interoception, the feedback that we're getting from the body to regulate our world
love that.
and regulate the way that we interact with the world. And it doesn't just involve me and my own mental capacity or emotional capacity, but lots of really good stuff, especially through polyvagal theory and some of the research that's come out of that to look at that interactive piece. And that, when I'm well regulated and I'm in a place where I have the world around me sort of in that place with me, I can better sit with my kids, and I can better sit with my wife, and I can better sit with my clients and really be with them to hear them and to listen and to respond in such a way that isn't a threatening way. And it just really sets me up for having positive interactions throughout the day. And I'm not a toxic positivity person whatsoever. If you're
Mhm.
having a shitty day,
Yeah,
have your shitty day.
yeah, yeah.
You don't have to try and fake being happy. But, starting a day with, and if I wake up, like I said, if I wake up and it's like, man, what the F did I do that I'm so crappy right now.
Yeah.
It's okay. Allow yourself to be crappy. But at the same time, are there things that I can control that I can do something about? And so that again, this is my mindful practice, this is my meditation, this is my biofeedback or my breathing practices. So usually my biofeedback is done in the morning. And so when I do my breathing practices, it'll be kind of in that first hour or so and of getting up. And sometimes I'll read if there's a book I'm really into, or sometimes I'll journal if I've got some things on my mind. And sometimes, you know what, I sit down and I'm like, okay, I'm primed for work. So actually, I
Yeah.
use that time for work if that's what feels natural. But what I do, no matter what it is, I'm always thinking, okay, what can I do in a well-regulated state?
Hmm.
So in that first hour is about regulating. Now, a lot of times I'll use that time for my morning walks. And so I do 4 to 5 times a week where I'll go for, it's usually 20 to 30 minutes in the summer, where I'll get up and go and do a 20 to 30. So we're not talking ridiculous here.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit of time. In the winter, I have to sort of lump that in with my resistance training just because I have
Yeah.
to go to a gym to do it. Walking outside in the snowbanks is not fun.
Yep.
So and then 2 to 3 times a week, I'll hit the gym and maybe up to four, depending on what phase of where I am in life. If I'm training for a powerlifting meet, for example, it'll be probably 4 days a week. If I'm just looking to maintain or to just do some general strengthening, 2 to 3 is usually what I'll do. And again, it's not super prescriptive. Love going. Lately, I've been going with my son, who's going to be 19 coming up here in about a couple months, and so we go to the gym together 2 to 3 times a week, and yeah, and that's my exercise piece of things. Moderation in food does fluctuate. Sometimes I focus, sometimes I don't. I'm on a very focused phase right now where I'm really trying to get veggies and high quality protein in every meal. Limit the carbs, especially the sugars, but again, moderation when it
Yeah.
comes to that. And then just try to avoid my snacks at night, which actually I've been pretty good. And actually, the 5 a.m. starts really help with that too,
Yeah.
because you go to bed early too. There's no time for
Yeah.
snacking.
Awesome. I'd love to wrap up our discussion is, as we sit here with the grays in our beards and in our hair, just any advice that if you were looking back at your 25-year-old self or 32-year-old self, I'm curious, if you look back at that rugby player who like it sounds like your experience is like most other rugby players, that play hard and then things happen at the bar afterwards. I've heard some stories over the years. But just kind of what advice would you give to your younger self with that? What's some of the wisdom that you've developed over the years working in the fields, bringing this expertise on that you just
Yeah.
maybe slide them a note to think about?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the mood. Um, I always feel like, I'm here, I'm alive, relatively healthy. There's a reason I got where I was or I am. And yeah, there's been some mistakes along the way, but those mistakes have formed me. So there's part of
Right.
me that kind of goes, you know what, just give yourself some grace that it's all gonna be okay.
I love it.
And I think that's part of it. And I'd say that's probably the most important message. But if you want specifics and things that I actually think about, one would be, when you're not training hard and when you don't have as much money because you're in school or whatever, maybe 2 boxes of KD a day is not the best choice. Maybe avoid that. Think about maybe cutting yourself off after the second beer. You don't have to go to 20.
Rugby, baby, rugby.
That's right. And then just I think just keep consistent. Try and keep consistent with that grace and moderation, and don't necessarily go so much into this is the only thing that I'm focused
Right.
on and doing. And I think that's where that moderation really makes a big difference.
Wonderful way to wrap us up. Well, I knew this discussion would be fascinating and give me some things to think about as well. So, Scotty, I appreciate you. I'm so excited for our training. Again, that's on March 13th. You can find more information of that at optimalhrv.com/trainings. You can also go to our coaching page. Scotty is one of the coaches we push out because we know anybody who's interested in this conversation, how that you can apply some of this to whether it's your own mental health, your physical health. Scotty is somebody we have 1,000% confidence in. So I'm proud to have him featured as a coach on our website. So, my friend, thanks so much. We'll put contact information for Scotty in the show notes here as well. And Scotty, as always, my friend, I appreciate you being on this journey with me and learning and sharing along the way. So, thanks for sharing your journey with us as well.
And thank you for the invite and the consistent support. It's really nice to have a brother in arms along this path that we're going on. So yeah, always appreciate you as well.
All right, as always, we'll see everybody next week.